Chapter 3, Part 1. Marty. Thank God he'd fallen asleep. Mid-sentence, he just passed out. But I guess that happens as men get older. My granddaddy randomly fell asleep places too. As I walked toward the Minos History Museum, the box felt heavy beneath my coat. Rex Carlberg, one of the archivists, he was an old friend of mine from grammar school. He was always begging me to stop by his new job and see all the antiquities. I bet he'd be just thrilled with this stupid box. I could unload the thing for a tidy profit and get the boss back on track. I needed his know-how, his connections, and a paycheck if I was ever going to find charity. I marched through the museum doors like a woman on a mission. When asked to buy a ticket, I informed them I was here to see Rex. If they'd please fetch him for me, I'd be ever so grateful. The woman looked at me, suspicious, but phoned down to the archives. "Rex will be up in a minute. You may sit there and wait," she said, pointing to a bench across from her booth. I went to take a seat, but before my legs could even brush the bench, Rex was running to me, waving like a madman. "Marty, I'm so glad you finally came. We just got a new mummy. I think it's a fake, but Claude thinks it's real. We're just waiting for the radiocarbon dating to come back. Have you heard of radiocarbon dating? It's the latest technology, discovered just a year ago by Willard Libby. It allows us to date things." "It's good to see you, Rex," I interrupted him. He had a terrible habit of rambling, and I didn't have time for it today. "I'd love to see your mummy some other time. Today I've brought you a find. Want you to take a look and tell me what the museum would pay for it." His face darkened a bit. I could tell I'd hurt his feelings. "Oh, sure. I suppose. My office is this way," he said. "If you're quick, we can go take a look at that mummy," I conceded. It was only fair. One good turn deserves another. His smile returned, and I followed him behind a painting of the underground labyrinth that had earned our city its name. The labyrinth was discovered in 1785 by a farmer whose plow and oxen plummeted to their deaths when part of the roof caved in. Its origins are still widely debated, since the architecture and design have a very Roman feel. Still, no other evidence of who created it has been found. No tools, pottery, bones. Just the labyrinth. Rex's office was small and stacked floor to ceiling with books and files. If this gig with Demetri fell through, I might be able to pick up some side work here getting Rex organized. Men are hopeless when it comes to getting things in order. "All right, Marty," Rex said. "What do you have for me?" "This," I said, pulling the box from beneath my coat. Rex uncharacteristically snatched it from my hands and began looking it over with great zeal. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "From a friend," I said. "Is this friend where you have it?" he asked me. I wanted to be offended, but I knew I had a particular, slightly deserved reputation in the old neighborhood, so I let it slide. I looked at my watch. By now? Probably. Trust me, he wants rid of this thing. He was going to dump it in the bay, but I thought here might be a more suitable place for it. "Well, I have to examine it further, but if this is what I think it is, you have quite the find here," he said. His focus was on the box, though. He was reading the raised lettering around the outside. "Aha!" he said, suddenly putting the box on his desk and pressing on two of the symbols simultaneously. The labyrinth on the top shot backward, and a new maze was pushed to the top. "What in the hell?" I asked. Rex's face was glowing with delight.
Demetri. I'd been scouring the streets for what felt like hours. Hadn't caught so much as a glimpse of Martina. It was a fool's errand, I knew. I didn't know where she was going. Didn't know how she got there. Hell, I barely knew the kid outside of her determination in getting me to teach her how to sleuth properly. And just from my short time with her, she was impulsive, stubborn, and naive. A recipe for disaster in this kind of work. You can't take anything at face value. I remember an old saying from when I first started. Don't believe anything you see, and less of what you hear. I haven't heard a more precise philosophy. It served me well. A magician will never want you to look away from where he's directing you, after all. And that's the same with anyone who has a particular agenda, for good or ill. I pulled off the road and parked. Rubbing my hands and my eyes, I was still tired. Exhausted would be more accurate. I did need sleep. I'm not going to be worth much if my head isn't straight, much less my vision, I thought. I took a quick look around, trying to get my bearings. Just go home, worry about this after a bit of shut-eye. I nodded. That's when I saw something that struck a chord. On the corner of the block, a couple of figures stood in what looked like robes. Flashes of that dream kicked around my mind. I rubbed my eyes and looked again through the rain. Ponchos. Hooded ponchos. Folks just trying to stay dry. Definitely a clear sign for me to call it a day. Thinking on it, I'm not even sure what today is anymore, or even what time for that matter. I took a quick look at my watch. Too late to be early, but only by a little. I pulled back onto the road and began the winding journey back home. It was the one thing my ex left me. My home. A little place on the eastern outskirts of Minos. It was a generational home, handed down to the first son since we got here. It was a farmstead that shrunk with the times, until all that remained was the house and a little plot of land. A couple of acres if you're generous. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. My little piece of peace. It was a little out of the way, which didn't bother me. It's nice to get out of the noise of the city. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I pulled up alongside the white painted porch and shut the car off. Exiting the car, I did a quick once-over of the property. Even in my exhausted state, wouldn't do to let the caution drift in the breeze. If those lunatics found out I had anything to do with their artifact, they'd come looking. Even if it was on the low-end chance of happening, I'd prefer to bet safe. Didn't see anything that stuck out. So far, so good. I shook some of the rain off me as I climbed the creaking steps to the front door. It was good to be home. I slid my key in the deadbolt and heard it click before I pushed the door open. The house was dark. Always seemed to be these days. Not that it had much life in her too long ago, but it was never dark. I chuckled dryly as I shook off my coat and hung it and my hat near the door. I double-checked the lock before making my way to my liquor cabinet. I pulled out a bottle of whiskey and a glass and poured myself a nightcap. I sipped at it as I sat, slipping my shoes off. I looked around the place, taking another sip. It was pretty sparse for furnishing these days. Hadn't had the motivation to put more into it than what was necessary after she took what she could fit in a moving truck. Dames of trouble, that's for certain. I continued sipping my drink as memories floated past my eyes. Good times and bad. C'est la vie. I topped off my drink before heading to the bedroom. Sparse living, you might call it. A bed, dresser, nightstand with a lamp, a chair, and a little radio off in the corner that I had forgotten to turn off. It was playing some smooth tune. Not a bad life. I loosened my tie and threw it on the dresser before finishing my drink and setting the glass on my nightstand. I didn't bother with the rest of my clothes as I crawled into bed, planting my head firmly on my feather pillow. I could feel my exhaustion taking over. This was probably the best damn idea I'd had all day. I started to close my eyes, feeling them get heavy, the lids feeling like they had weights on them. And right before I fell into a dead sleep, a thought occurred to me. Had I left my radio on? If you enjoyed this production,
Remember to like and subscribe,
and don't forget to follow us on social media,
which you can find linked in our bio
we'll see you next time.
on Dueling Pens.
Bum, bum, bum.
I can't believe you left me in the room with that woman.